So you got 15 months and you get out in 11 months. What was that first day like?
Actually, I didn't get out in 11 months. I was, after a year, I was directed to go to a halfway house. And I went to that halfway house and I was having issues with my knee. And one of the counselors said I could go to the gym across the street. I went to that gym across the street. And one of the other employees from the halfway house saw me in the gym and said that I was out of bounds. And I had said the other guy gave me permission. They went back to the other guy and he said he didn't give me permission when he did. They shackled and handcuffed me and took me in a van to the county jail and threw me in solitary confinement for 15 days and then threw me back in prison for 3 more months.
Okay, so you did 14 months total?
So I did the whole 15 months.
Did the whole 15. So what was it like to get out after 15 months?
Fresh of breath air, felt terrific to, be out, but still a little nervous, not knowing what direction I was going to head in. And again, how was I going to support my 4 daughters?
Right, because you come out, you no longer have a job. You're definitely not going to be a referee anymore for any sport at that time. I mean, how are you? And you have a felony on your record?
Yes.
How were you getting by early on?
Early on, it was difficult. I was fortunate enough that I had a supportive family and parents. I got a job immediately working for a counselor of a gambling treatment center. And I was doing, odd jobs just to, stay afloat and get started while I was still on probation. And, just getting my life started again. I had a very good support system with my family, which, helped me get started.
Right. And then in 2016, a documentary came out called Dirty Games, The Dark Side of Sports.
Right.
And that was based on you.
I think I was a section of it. There was a couple of documentaries that came out, and that one was, a guy out of Germany who did it, and my story was one part of that.
There was a situation in 2017 over your daughter and her being at a friend's house.
Correct.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. I had a daughter who was having issues with some substance abuse. My ex-wife called me and said she hadn't seen her for 4 days, and I started calling around and I found out where she was, and I went to the house where she was. The parents and the kids were in there doing drugs, and she came stumbling out and she was going to drive, and I took her keys from her and called the police. And then the father came out of the house and told me to get lost, that she was with him. And I told him I had called the cops, and I went up the street, and he came up the street after me with 3 other guys. And I told them if they continued to come up the street, I had a hammer in the car, and I told them I was going to knock their fucking teeth down their throat if they took one more step towards me. And the police, police showed up, and basically they told the police that I threatened them, which I said I did, and didn't think that I did anything wrong, and they arrested me and threw me in jail for a night.
Right. You got released on $5,000 bond, but ultimately it was dropped, right?
It was dropped. And if you asked me how I paid the last one, I paid that one with cash.
Got it. In 2018, the NBA started pushing for legal sports gambling nationwide with a cut of the bets. Did you find that somewhat ironic?
Sure. I mean, the bottom line is that, everything the NBA does is, revolved around dollar and making that revenue higher as they can. And, whatever they need to do, they're going to do it. And if it's taking a piece of the action of bets at every arena, they're going to do it.
Well, right. I mean, because even some of the bigger networks like ESPN, they're getting into sports betting and incorporating sports betting into their shows and everything else like that. So you kind of have this whole industry that was, either illegal or based in certain cities, gambling cities like Vegas or Atlantic City, and now it's becoming just a mainstream kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that, again, whatever they need to do or whatever anybody needs to do to make the environment around them better financially, they're going to do. And each individual, state is going to capitalize on the tax dollar coming in from the revenue from gambling. So they're going to do it and, take that money and put it into whatever they need to put it into, whether it's the school system or, handicap individuals that they can make the lives better for them. I think they're going to use it however they can do it to better the environment around them.
Well, and then in 2021, you joined Major League Wrestling, where you became a referee for a wrestling league. And you became a heel at that.
Right. It was a situation where, I think I was approached to be a referee and the skits were set up and, rather than hide from it, I decided to, endorse it and go with it and have a little fun with it. And, I was paid very well for doing it. So, it was a situation where I felt like I couldn't turn it down and, it became successful for me.
I mean, ultimately, you became the face of illegal gambling in sports. But when you look at what's really happening and what you've seen, what you heard, you said you didn't know of any other referees that were engaging in what you were doing. But I'm sure along the way, there are some players that bet on themselves, bet on their own teams, everything else like that. I mean, in baseball, the whole Pete Rose scandal happened, which is why he's not in the Hall of Fame. Have you ever heard of players actually betting on themselves?
Definitely. Michael Jordan has come out and said, or maybe he hasn't come out and said it, but other people have said that, he has told people that, he was going to score a certain amount of points in a game that night and to bet the over of him having over 30 or 35 points that night. And people have done it. So, I don't think there's any secret that, within the NBA family, there's a lot of gambling that goes on between the players, whether it's on an airplane in card games or during warm-ups, shooting three-point shots. There's a lot of stories that have gone around about a lot of gambling within the NBA.
Well, I mean, playing cards on a plane is not a big deal. I mean,
Right.
there's nothing really illegal about that. But betting on your own team to hit a certain spread, getting to that number, and then purposely not making a couple of baskets, that's something different.
Sure.
Have you ever heard of anything like that?
No, not that I can say that I've heard.
Okay. Do you think it's really happening, though?
Absolutely, I do. I think, when Michael Jordan was in that whole mess owing that professional gambler hundreds of thousands of dollars, they had talked about different things with games that were going on, and there's no doubt that I'm sure he probably said to him, we're going to cover tonight. There's no doubt we're going to cover tonight. And he was in the game a lot of times when he shouldn't have been. A lot of times at the end of a game, if a team's up 7, 8, 9 points, they take the star out to avoid them getting hurt. And a lot of times he was still in the game.
Yeah. Well, Tim, I appreciate you coming in and telling your story. This is just very much of a cautionary tale because gambling is so addictive and it's really not designed for you to win. When you go to these casinos in Vegas, that's all made off people losing.
Right.
Which is why I never gambled. I've always felt like it's geared against you. And I think what your story has really illustrated is based on all the risks that you took and all the penalties that you ended up having, the rewards were just minimal.
Right. It was a mess. My life was a mess at the time. And there wasn't a day that didn't go by that I didn't have a piece of paper with 10 bets on it. And it wasn't, a time in the summer that I wasn't home, that I wasn't out on the golf course, gambling for, thousands of dollars and looking forward to jumping in a limo and going down to Atlantic City. So I could sit at that blackjack table for 10 hours and feel like it was 30 minutes. That's how much of an enjoyment it was for me to do it.
Right. But ultimately, you didn't walk away with very much money and probably lost money a lot of times.
No doubt about it. A lot of guys aren't able to recover the way I did. But again, with the support of family and friends, I was able to rebuild my life and get involved in purchasing, foreclosures from banks when I got out of jail, and was lucky that in that Florida area, nobody wanted them. I was one of the few people that was buying them up, and they're worth a lot more than what I paid for them, and they're all rented out. So knock on wood, one of the few success stories of somebody that was able to rebuild their life. And, I can only hope that other people get that opportunity.
But when you watch movies like Casino, one of my favorite all-time films, the term degenerate gambler comes up a lot.
Right.
Would you consider at one point you were a degenerate gambler?
As bad as you could be. Absolutely. No doubt about it. It like I said, it consumed my life when I would be on the road. I would hear that USA Today hit outside the door. They would drop the newspaper outside your hotel room door, and it would be about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'd wake up. This was before computers and everything, just to see what the lines were in the games that day. So, I just look forward to seeing that every day.
Yeah. And, had you not done that, I mean, referees, you could referee into your 60s, right?
Sure.
So at 56, your age right now, instead of sitting here trying to figure out the next steps in your life, you could have been a referee in the finals.
No doubt.
A bigger salary,
yep.
more accolades. You could have progressed with your career, and you were a great referee. That's the whole thing. It's not like you were a marginal referee and you were having to bet to try to supplement your income because you knew you were about to get fired. No, you were actually great at your job. You were doing the playoffs. The next logical step would have been to do the finals, and that would have put you in a class, at the very top. But unfortunately, you made some bad decisions and you went to prison, and you could never go back to that line of work again.
Right. And I turn on the TV a lot and see the games, and I see guys that I came in with and see them running up and down the floor. And, there's times where I feel sorry for myself and say that should be me. And you talked about accolades of being in the NBA. The only accolades I want now is that my 4 daughters look at me and say, you know what? He's a good dad, and he has recovered from this, and we're all happy. That's really the only thing that matters to me.
And you don't bet anymore at all?
No.
So no lottery tickets, no slot machines.
No, definitely not.
No blackjack, nothing. Do you ever get tempted sometimes?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I like to starting to play, golf, or see my friends playing golf, or, see guys saying that they're going to go to the casinos, and, there's always that excitement of going and watching or being a part of it. And it's just something that really, you have to stay away from.
There you go. Well, Tim, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I wish you the best, man. You're still young, 56 years old. You still have many years ahead of you. Sounds like you're doing well in real estate. You stayed on the straight and narrow. You got 4 kids that love you. And I think a lot of people can relate to your story. We've all gambled. I mean, I've gambled. I wasn't very good at it. I never got caught up in it. But come to think of it, this is something that really affected my life. I had a friend, very close friend of mine named Leonard. In high school, I've never told this story before. So in high school, he started to gamble. And he started to realize at one point that he could make more money working with other gamblers. So he started building a network of established gamblers where he would help them pick various games, and he would get a cut, and he would explain the process to me. It'd be crazy. If he lost a couple games to someone, he would call him back from a different number with a fake accent and try to get them working with him again. And then with that came the drugs, and he started to go out. He had people on payroll that were doing his tests. He got caught, kicked out of school. So then he moved out, started doing drugs. And at 23 years old, he overdosed on cocaine in Las Vegas and died.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
And I remember going to his funeral and saying, I'm never going to try cocaine because of this.
Right.
And I never tried cocaine, which was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
Yeah, and one of the things that people don't realize is gambling is just along the lines of drug addiction and alcoholism. And I should have gotten a 2-point reduction in the federal sentencing guidelines for a gambling addiction. And the judge wouldn't give it to me because that would have meant that I wouldn't go to jail. So there were so many things that showed that she was just pro NBA and trying to put me in jail and silence me, that, even the guy that was the lead United States attorney for the Eastern District of New York, his name was Greg Andres, and he ended up leaving the United States Attorney's office 3 months after my case was over, going to a law firm tripling his salary and doing all the outside legal counsel work for the NBA. And the FBI agents were furious that that took place and how unethical that was. And yet that was all just swept under the rug and really never came out.
Yeah. When I look at my friend, I mean, he died of drugs, but it started with gambling.
Right.
And, you know, that was luckily two things I never got into because I got to see what the worst case scenario was. So I just left it all alone. It was a cautionary tale for me. But it just shows how it's all interrelated and how that fast money, that fast life, the thrill of gambling. I mean, everyone likes gambling. Everyone likes the feeling of, okay, am I going to win? Am I going to lose? But ultimately, it's a zero-sum game. It's, you know, people like to say that stock investing is the same as gambling. No, it's not. You're buying a piece of a company. It's very different. You know, when you bet, there's nothing that gets bought or sold or owned. It's just a bet. And once the game is over, the money gets distributed and you're done. So it's very different. So instead of, when I think about gambling, I think, well, I could gamble and the odds are slightly stacked against me, or I could put my money in the S&P 500. And I know for a fact over the last 150 years that if you leave your money in for a certain amount of time, you're guaranteed to earn it back. So why put your money in this where you're probably going to lose, whereas to put your money in that where you're probably going to win? Right. And that's where I put all my money. And over the last 15 years, it transformed my life. If it wasn't for investing, I wouldn't be where I am today and I wouldn't have the peace of mind. If I had instead took that money and gambled, I'd probably be broke right now.
Not a good feeling when you do.
Exactly. Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, you too, bud.